got a super awesome, smart, handsome, special guest speaker today. He's got two thumbs and looks like this guy. Awesome. So in just a minute, I'm going to share my screen. We'll kind of talk about LinkedIn sales KPIs, some ways you can do reporting, optimizing your efforts, what are KPIs, what should you measure, how, that kind of thing. But first, 2 minutes on, why we're talking about this in our, me personally, my journey. So, 10 plus years ago, my background was more in marketing than sales, actually, which is very helpful, actually, if you're going to be moving to a sales position, ironically. So coming from a marketing background, I was used to like reporting dashboards and analytics and all that stuff that's kind of table stakes for marketing. So when I started my first business forever ago, Zico, where we just focused on sales only, on LinkedIn, I was like, shoot, I need some kind of report for our clients. And we need that for two reasons. Number one, we need it so our clients know we're doing stuff, right? And then number two, we need it for internal accountability, because we need to see what areas of our efforts are under or over performing. And there's that title tag in the email: you cannot manage what you don't measure. And so I felt this like pain as an agency owner that I literally cannot do any kind of reporting natively on our efforts. It's just like such a pain point. So you jump around and you putz around in LinkedIn, and you would think, even though it's LinkedIn, welcome Scott Allen, good to see you. Even though it's LinkedIn, even though it's Microsoft and the expectations are low, it's still underwhelming with what LinkedIn's going to give you, right? Like there is no way for you to go on LinkedIn and look at a data point that says these are how many invites you sent out last month, and here's how many were accepted. You'd think that'd be good to know, right? These are how many people you talked to last month, and these are how many people replied, and here's how many didn't. You think that would be baked in? It's not. And so that deficiency on LinkedIn and the requirement of an agency owner, and the pressure is larger if you're an agency owner, but it's still important if you're a solopreneur just doing stuff on LinkedIn, kind of drove us to go, we need to figure out how to do reporting. That means we need to figure out exactly what data metrics or KPIs that we need to measure, and then what should those be so that we can do a good job and retain our clients, all of that stuff. So we've been doing that for many years now. And so it's something I'm extra passionate about, because what happens is if you are doing sales on LinkedIn and you are not measuring your KPIs, you're you're set up for failure. And then I said this in the email too, but just to reiterate, Monty knows, we'll be in a sales call. I'll ask someone, they say, we're doing LinkedIn. I'll say, oh, great. You tell me what are your KPIs and what are your invite accept rates? What are your reply rates? And they'll tell me numbers. And I'm like, you're so full of it. I can't say that because I have to be nice because it's a sales call. But I'm like, I've looked at a zillion of these things and I know that's too high. And so then we kind of hash it out. And when, the rubber hits the road, it's, oh yeah, actually it's way lower than I thought. I'm like, I totally get it, because people like to fudge the numbers, especially when they're in front of other people. That's just what people do with their egos.
Here's by the way, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
By the time I can get them on the phone, our close rate's 100%.
Yeah, but totally. But here's where, and then I'll jump on the slides in just a minute. But here's where, if you don't figure this out, and you don't measure KPIs, you can manage things. What happens is you're set up for failure because your action plan that you create is wrong. It's wrong, and people always overestimate their awesomeness. And then when they see the hard data, they go, oh, I'm not as awesome as I thought. And so that submarines the actual quantity of leads that go in, that submarines their close or acquisition rates, and that means their revenue goals are missed. And it's all because they thought they were awesome, and they fudged the numbers, and their action plan was just subpar. And so I've been there, I've seen a lot of people be there. And so my hope is that today you all walk away, and I know there's a mix here of people who own agencies who do this, and there's some individuals here. My hope is that you walk away going, okay, these are the KPIs that I should measure. Here's a few ways that I could measure them. And here's what my kind of benchmark number should be so that I can be set up for success. But even more important is just that you walk away going, I'm going to do it. All right. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to actually be in presentation mode. So Monty, if you could just confirm for me that you can see screen one, the slides, and then screen two, the reporting dashboard and stuff.
You're live. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. So we'll keep this part short and sweet. Sales KPIs. A couple points I want to talk about here. I want to make note that as we go here, this is going to be kind of progressive. It's going to be one thing becomes a foundation that you build on layer after layer. So first we'll talk about, what is a KPI? Because you might know about it, but a whole lot of people have no idea what that acronym means. So we'll talk briefly what's KPI. And then, getting more granular, because KPI can be for anything. What's a sales KPI specifically, right? So what is a sales KPI? What about then, if you know what a sales KPI is, what are LinkedIn sales KPIs? If we're going to bring it in to be that niche, what should they be on LinkedIn? What about which KPIs should you measure on LinkedIn? Which ones? There's a lot of things that you can measure on there. Monty made the joke earlier about the profile views. If you're doing sales, is that a KPI you should care about? So we can talk about that. Then we'll talk about, how can you actually measure them? Because as I mentioned a minute ago, LinkedIn has absolutely nothing. So underwhelming. What should my KPI goals be? And then if we have time for it, we'll briefly hit on optimizing sales outreach using KPI data. So this topic, again, it's really big. It's kind of sophisticated for people who are in sales leaders, if you're using LinkedIn. So you could easily talk about this for a few hours. So I'm going to be kind of high level today. Maybe we can do part two later. So what is a KPI for all you new folks out there? I want to super stress here. Actually here, it's an acronym, right? KPI acronym, key performance indicator. But the thing that I really want to stress after you know what the acronym letters mean, key performance indicator, I really want to stress, it has to be a measurable number. That's why it's bold. It's a measurable number. So a KPI is not this like idea or a hope or expectation or feeling. So what will happen is, you'll be in a meeting with your boss and we'll say, all right, what are we going to do next quarter? And then we're going to grow, we're going to add revenue. It's like, well, it's not a KPI. There's no number there. It's a hope and a kind of, destination, but I need something that I can measure. It has to be a measurable number. So it's the KPI, it's a measurable number of performance, and that's going to indicate success or failure. So if you can't measure it, it's not a KPI. So that is kind of at a high level. That is what a KPI is. You can use a KPI a million places in life. So let's kind of now do another layer. What's a sales KPI? Keeping in mind that, again, sales, the whole world kind of runs on sales, right? So no sales, no business. So sales is a big bear. But if you're talking about a sales KPI, the things that you measure might be different, but it's still always going to be a measurable number. So a sales KPI, measurable number of performance, and it's directly related to the success or failure of your sales efforts. So if you do any kind of sales, and if you have never discussed your sales KPIs, especially if you're a sales leader holding the team accountable, you need to get on that. So that's a sales KPI, kind of high level definition there. Some popular sales KPIs, again, popular because sales is huge and there are a million different types of businesses selling different things with different KPIs. But a few popular ones are going to be, a booked sales call. Duh, right? It's kind of like the place everyone starts. You might, though, be looking at, well, what's our lead to conversion ratio? For every 10 leads that come in, how many do we close? Statistically, has to be a measurable number. What about, in the last month, what's the number of qualified opportunities we uncovered? What's the revenue that each sales rep is generating? How many calls did they make? How many emails did they send? How many proposals did they send? So these are kind of just popular sales KPIs. There are a lot of other good ones out there, but just to kind of get the ball rolling for you, if this is a new topic for you, those are popular ones. So we've talked about KPIs, sales KPIs, adding one more layer, LinkedIn sales KPIs. So again, cannot stress enough, it has to be a measurable number of performance. And it's just going to be related to your success or failure of your sales efforts on LinkedIn. And I want to touch on briefly here, going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning, my background on the marketing piece. So when you're on the platform LinkedIn, there are things you can do that are more in line with marketing, and there are things that are more in line with sales. So like if you post content or you do a paid ad campaign, you're going to get some numbers in there, and there are some KPIs in there, but those are more on the marketing side of LinkedIn than the sales side, even though there's some overlap. So when we're talking about here in a moment, the LinkedIn sales, we're more talking about a person whose responsibility is to go out and start talking to people that could potentially buy and figure out what their needs are and give a proper call to action and record it all, write it all down, and kind of keep going. So it's more of the one-on-one sales context than a paid ad campaign or content. So there are KPIs there as well. But for this topic today, we're going to be sticking to that sort of one-on-one stuff. So it has to be a measurable number though. So that's LinkedIn sales KPI briefly. Popular LinkedIn sales KPIs. So be thinking to yourself, all right, have I ever measured these things? Have I ever, is it hard? How can I do it? So get your gears spinning. So popular LinkedIn sales KPIs might be contacts that converted to your CRM. And I had that first in bold because it's easier. And it's kind of just the first big win. If you've never done this, definitely do that. So contacts converted to CRM is one popular one. But what about, working backwards? You can't make a contact if you don't send an invite, right? So or you can't maybe do a messaging dialogue unless you send an email, but unless you send out the invite. So how many invites did you send? So how many invites did you send? How many in-mail did you send? How many new connections did you make? Give me a number. How many contacts did you make that actually replied to what you're saying? What's the number? What about how many future opportunities have you discovered this month? A lot of people aren't going to be ready to buy right now, but how many people were talking and you discovered right person, right company, not quite the right time, future opportunity? What's the number there? Or what about how many contacts are just straight up not a lead? That's almost like a sales fail KPI, but it's really good to know, because if you're having a big number not be a lead, that's important data for you to optimize your efforts later with maybe revising your targeting, that kind of thing. So those are pretty popular LinkedIn sales KPIs. So if these are your LinkedIn sales KPIs, you should be measuring them. It's like, duh. So you should be measuring people that converted your CRM. You should be measuring how many invites did you send? You should be measuring how many emails, you should be measuring how many new contacts did you make? You should be measuring how many opportunities you discovered, that kind of thing. So each person has their own unique goals and objectives, right? And so the things that they are going to measure might change a little bit, but at a kind of most basic level, you should be measuring how many invites you sent. You should be measuring how many people are talking. You should be measuring how many opportunities you discovered, how many people are not a lead, and how many convert to your CRM. Should be measuring them. So how can you measure the KPIs? Whoops, let's just do this. Sorry. So how can you measure them? Said it a minute ago, LinkedIn doesn't make it easy. Nothing's built in at all. Like 0 things are built in. 0. I mean, 0. We can even pause for a second here. Is there any place on LinkedIn that shows you for growing your network and replies and stuff? Is there anywhere other than like where you can just go on LinkedIn to a dashboard and they'll show you it, natively in LinkedIn, invites out, accepted, messages sent, replied, conversions? Nothing's baked in, right?
I think there's a little bit in the management reports from Sales Navigator Enterprise.
That's true. That is related
So
to
just a
more.
little bit.
That's right. So if you are on the enterprise, or I think they just rebranded it to advanced or something, but as the company or as an admin seat, you can see some performance reports related to, I think that's maybe even Mike, I'd love to hear more on that. I think it's more in mail than a standard invite and message though. But yeah, so there's like nothing baked in that'll show you how many new contacts a salesperson makes, how many messages went out, how many were replied. There's nothing baked in at all. So really, there are a few things you can do, and we've done a number of things over the years. So one is you can use LinkedIn Sales Navigator lead lists. I'll jump over to LinkedIn in a minute and kind of give you a visual so you can see what that looks like and how you can take that data and use it to measure KPIs, and even if you wanted to do like a report. So it's a little bit more manual, but you can, as someone's reply, as you send out an invite, you add them to a list. They accept and you send a message, you add them to a list. You know, they say they're qualified, but not yet, you move them to a list. And so it's kind of like a pre-pipeline. So you're using LinkedIn lead list and sales nav lead list in that way. It's definitely one way to measure KPI, and it's native to LinkedIn, which is nice. The data visualization though is just not as fancy with mats and like pie graphs and stuff. So another solution could be a third-party tool. So there are a number of third-party tools that can help you measure some KPIs. So some third-party tools will do like a tagging solution. So it's like maybe a Chrome extension or an app you're working with where you're on a profile, and then, or maybe even like in the thread, and then you can apply a tag. And then you, just like with changing a person from lead list to lead list, you can apply a tag, update the tag, and then it'll kind of give you the numbers in bulk there. So that's another way that you could possibly do that. Most automation tools, if you're going that route, they'll provide you some light numbers on how many invites you sent out, how many were connected, and how many replied. But that's really about where it ends, because right now, an automation tool is not going to know post the conversation, the dialogue happened. They're not going to know, you know, this person was a lead, this person was not a lead, this person's qualified, but for later, this person converted your CRM. They're not really going to know that. So there's a little bit of a shortfall there. You could also do a spreadsheet with some aspirin, or just because it's going to give you such a headache. So let me do this here.
Isaac, one more thing in that category. We're just talking about LinkedIn, but email goes with LinkedIn so much, and the integration of the statistics for outreach, including email outreach, is a pretty powerful component of the dashboard.
Yep. So if we are going to be measuring KPIs, we don't use any third-party tools like for tagging or anything. So what I'm just going to kind of do here is show you the native solution, which would be a sales nav lead list. Yep. Yeah. So what we're doing is these are the invites that we've sent out. Once someone starts talking, we move them through. Then move them through like right here. And then you can take these numbers and say, all right, you know, if you want to plug them into like an Excel sheet, which I'll show you in a minute, you can say, all right, these are how many invites we sent out. We have this right now, this many people, 27 people, are talking right now, but we're still qualifying them. That's a KPI, right? Because we've made a contact, they've replied, they're being qualified. We have right now one person where they're interested, we're about ready to plug them into our CRM, and we're just confirming their contact info. We have 538 people who have converted to CRM. Awesome. We have 765 people here who are qualified. They're just not ready to buy yet. We have people, 744, who've just never replied. We've got a few categories here, people who just stopped talking, and then 264 were actually not a lead, and then 303 had became clients, and then 14 referrals. So for the LinkedIn sales KPIs being, you know, like how many invites did you send? This is one way that you could grab the data originally. And how many invites that got sent out were accepted. It's one way that you can grab the data. How many people replied? This is one way you can grab the data. So we use that data and kind of assemble it like this, just to give you an idea here for what you can do. So you've got, in the last 30 days, this is 2 people together, so the numbers look extra high, but 1,500 invites, we've got 437 people talking in the last 30 days. We've got our kind of pre-pipeline here, event registrations, added to CRM, new contacts, all that stuff. So you can only take the info and cook it up like this if you've been grabbing the data. So you have to grab the data to be able to do any kind of report. So right here in its raw form, this is not very pretty, but the numbers are there. So really, to originally get those numbers, you either have to do something like use a lead list or a third-party tool or a spreadsheet. You have to grab the data yourself. LinkedIn's not going to just give it to you. You have to grab it yourself. And so we found that this is a pretty easy way to grab it just as part of your process as you go. It's not necessarily the only way, but it's a pretty easy way. So that's how you can grab the data. And then if you want to plug it in to a reporting suite, you can. Let's see here. Before we actually, let's do this. Let's talk briefly about the numbers to aim for. So if we are I'll give you some numbers, but keep in mind that every industry is a little different. If you're targeting people who are really active on LinkedIn, that's going to make a huge difference. If you're selling something that no one wants, that's going to make a huge difference. If your only call to action that you can give is to do a demo or a sales call, that's going to make a difference in your numbers. But sort of the numbers that our team aims for when we launch a campaign are, for the invites accepted, I like to see this more at like 30%. And when you first start a campaign where you're first engaging with new people, it's usually a lot higher, because usually people are starting with LinkedIn search and they're kind of going through the search results, and the best, most active people are at the front. So your numbers in the beginning might be amazing, and then after a year, they'll kind of taper down and go, if it's under 25%, I'm going, oh, we have a problem. So I say you want at least 1 in 3 invites accepted, and the more the better, obviously. And there are some things you can do there to bring it up. But if you don't know how many invites are sent and accepted, you just never know if you need to tweak anything. You would never know. You might think your acceptance rate's amazing, but it might be, it might not be. And then for people who are talking, we like to see, and again, a lot of it depends on what you're saying, who you're talking to, and who you are. But a kind of benchmark that we shoot for is we like to see within 30 days, half of all new contacts are having some kind of conversation on the platform. Obviously, the more is the better. But if we see it under about 50%, then we're going to say, you know what, our acceptance rates look great, but our reply rates are not great. So if our reply rates are not great, maybe we need to change what we're saying to people. But you never know unless you're grabbing the data and looking at it, right? For conversion rates, now this particular, this is a real client, by the way, just so you know. This particular client, though, their call to action is, it's a pretty low friction, high value. So it's an easy call to action. It's higher funnel. So the conversion rates are lower. If your conversions that you're measuring for your LinkedIn sales KPI is like book a sales call, it's going to be much lower, probably 3 to 5%. And again, the higher perceived value and the lower the friction there, the better your numbers are going to be. But aim for like 5% of all new contacts get plugged into your CRM as wanting to have some kind of sales call. All right, so that's probably about it. I'm going to jump over here once more and say for the panelists. Now, if you are a panelist, you know who you are. If you're not a panelist, please hold off chiming in until the open Q&A section. So I would love to hear from the panelists in here, and I'll stop sharing my screen in a moment. What KPIs do you all measure? How do you measure them? And what are the numbers that you usually see? So I'll leave this up here just for a minute so you can remember the questions, and you don't have to stick on these three. These are just kind of starters, but panelists, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Your connect rate is directly related to your targeting. If you're targeting posted in 30-day people, there you go. If you're targeting just twos, there you go. If you're targeting fellow group members, you're in a different category, or third levels, or folks in another country. So there's quite a few asterisks that go with that.
There absolutely are. And Mike, what would you say? I mean, if you're talking to a client and they're going to say, Mike, what are the, across the board, just broadly, what invite acceptance rates should I hope to see if things are going average? What number would you give them?
If I'm doing twos and threes without any with some major Boolean, what we're going to be talking about next week, major Boolean next week, 20%, typically. If we're talking twos and threes, raw search, no qualifiers.
Yep.
Activity.
What about you, Dimitri? I'd love to hear, I know you're good about this kind of thing. You have any thoughts there?
Oh, can I show something?
Sure, you can.
Always come prepared. Yeah, sure.
Go for it. Here, if you don't have screen sharing capabilities, let me know and I'll edit the permissions.
Yeah. So we're using Airtable for our clients. And this is the dashboard that we basically share. And we measure 7 KPIs in total. Well, actually it's 6, but we're looking at how many contacts we have generated since beginning of the relationship, and how many are not a lead, so basically not qualified. How many, this is the acceptance rate. So contact request acceptance rate. SQL for us is basically converted to client CRM. Just to be clear. And MQL is anybody who is who hasn't said I'm not a lead. Basically, people are top of mind, interested, qualified. Yep. So basically, yours was much more granular. We just basically, because to be honest, in the beginning I had like 16 KPIs or so, and I showed them to clients. Nobody cared.
Totally, yeah.
Clients basically care only about. So this chart is quite cool. So it shows us that like a progression of conversions, so of converted to clients CRM leads, and how much we had last week and how much we had the week before that. Basically, so that you see like a. So this
is an Airtable, which I'm not very familiar with Airtable. Can I ask, Dimitri? So the data is pulling in from your Airtable, sheets. Is that being a hybrid of some things are added automatically, maybe like passing data through a webhook, and some are manual?
Unfortunately, it's all manual. So what we do is we have like a, so we made a huge progress on this. We are organized on ClickUp, and then in ClickUp, all our lead generation specialists have like a task every day. It says update the numbers, and there is a link to a Airtable form, which is very easy to fill out. They just take the numbers of people from their Sales Navigator lead lists, basically what you showed before, and then Airtable calculates this, all these numbers. And this reporting sheet, we just had it set up once, and it's got filled automatically here on the left side. I can switch between clients, and of course, I picked the worst one to not make you feel bad right now. So.
No, yeah, thank you. It looks great. So Dimitri, so just so everyone knows, Dimitri also owns an agency who does this. So there's a lot of trial and error and research and money and time that goes into trying to get here. It's just so much. So Dimitri, from one agency owner to another, then so you're using lead lists to categorize the contacts, and then on a recurring basis, your team will go and enter the numbers that are in,
daily
in the lead lists, and then it gets into Airtable, and Airtable records that historically and then creates the reporting dashboard.
Yeah, they do daily. It costs them like 10 seconds. So it's basically there's the link to the specific client is already there. They just click it, the forms pops up, they put in 6 or 7 numbers, maybe 8, I don't know, 6 numbers, I think. And that's it. And all the rest are formulas in Airtable. This is set up once. But like I said, to get here was quite a distance. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a insane amount of work because you have to build it from scratch.
So the only problem is we cannot share this discreetly. So we cannot share just one client dashboard. We need to. So if I would send you the link to this, you would see all our clients basically.
Yeah,
so we
totally.
Looking into how this can be automated, and until then, we just our project manager just takes a screenshot of this and sends it to the client, and it's basically nobody ever complains. So it's it's cool.
You might be able to do like grab a snapshot, like in Airtable, automate, grab a snapshot, and then automatically email it. So
yeah, maybe.
So Viveka, Judy, and Mike, any other? Thank you, Dimitri, so much for that. That's so cool to see another person on the other side of the world, what they've built. I love it. So Judy's, Viveka, Scott, Mike, any other thoughts on KPIs that you measure, how you measure them, numbers to aim for the crowd here, and for all future generations watching this will be dramatically impacted by your great sage advice?
I was going to jump in and say there is the discussion you need to have vis-a-vis your client as well. You need to be very, very clear. I learned the hard way, but I had to learn how to be very clear to my attorneys, and depending on what industry, what kind of niche they're in, what KPIs, they understand which KPIs we're following for what reason, and when the conversion happens. And that is a sliding scale that I learned the hard way. They wanted to see clients. I quickly learned I can't crawl into their head and realize how good they are at closing. So I can present to them a highly qualified prospective client, but they have to. So that conversion conversation is super important from the get-go to set expectations. Yeah. So that's just kind of backing up from the conversation we're having.
It's totally true, because a conversion can be a broad term. So we've had the same thing. It's like, what's a conversion? And then it's, in my mind, it's like a qualified qualified person at a qualified company says they work with your kind of service, and they are interested in taking the conversation off LinkedIn. So within that, though, you've got various stages of where they're ready to buy. And so that's where, you just need, we've also learned that too. You have to really communicate with the client. This is all that we can measure. We want to get as many people into your CRM as possible, but a conversion that we're measuring could be they're ready to buy now, or they're ready to buy 3 quarters from now. Totally.
And the time frame is going to vary too. I mean, again, I'm just going back to my legal field, but a slip and fall is going to have a different life cycle span than, for example, an IP litigator from big law. They're nurturing a very, very different level, caliber, quality of potential client. That cycle tends to be a lot longer. So those expectations have to be set up front too. So they don't think, okay, tomorrow I'll have 10 qualified leads, right? In the big law where they're charging, 6 figures for their services. So that's a totally different cycle. That's also something that is kind of tangentially related to what we're talking about, but it has to be set clearly with those clients.
Absolutely. Judy's or Scott, you want to chime in at all before we move into open Q&A? All right. No?
No, I don't really have, this is really interesting for me. It's not an area that I do very well. So I'm just learning lots here. So I don't really have much to add. Thank you.
Very cool. All right. Well, Monty, I have not looked at the chat at all. Were there any really good things in there we should address before we do the live?
No, we've had a pretty quiet group today, so
okay.
we'll see if anybody has any questions. You might have answered all of the questions except for David's.
All right. All right. So let's move into open Q&A. Use a little raise your hand option in Zoom there, and we'll take you on as you raise your hands. So David, 30 seconds or less, you are live. You're also muted. Sorry.
Okay. You hear me?
Gotcha. Yep.
All right. I have an observation. I've built a lot of these systems for large multi-organizations. And the common thing that I think everyone should think about is what you're doing is modeling your business. And depending on the complexity of your business, you actually will look at your KPIs at different levels at different times. So it's well worth taking the time to rethink your KPIs and how they work for each level of your organization.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Anybody else have any questions related to LinkedIn sales KPIs? Shireen, you are next. 30, you're muted, but 30 seconds or less, please.
So I think that to what David was talking about, like model your organization, and what's interesting to me based off of that is how do you do that for a smaller organization? So I can understand a large organization, but when maybe you can share a little bit more about how do you do that for a smaller organization that may not have, I don't know, multiple salespeople, you're not an agency. And I just put that out there because what hit me was when Isaac was talking, the first thing I said, Shireen, you need to go back to your funnel. You need to go back and refine and really get clear on what your funnel is, right? At what areas are people coming in and trying to get them to convert to. And that just came up for me. But when I now think about, and how do I now map that to kind of like what David is talking about, like, it models your business. So maybe, and again, I understand from a large organization, but maybe you can break that down a bit, David, and say a little bit more for a smaller organization, if that even matters. I'm trying to connect.
It does. There is a point of diminishing returns, right? So for a small business where maybe the owner is doing sales, or it's a one-person show that's doing sales, really it comes back to how you have to choose which KPIs you want to measure. If you're doing sales, you're probably going to want to know the things that we kind of brought up. Like you're probably going to want to know how many invites did I send, how many people accepted, how many people are talking, how many people are qualified or not qualified, converted to CRM. So everyone probably wants to know the same KPIs at a basic level. The point of diminishing returns comes in for, it's like, how do you want to measure the information and how fancy do you want the data? So if you're a one-person show, I really think the easiest way to do it is using a lead list in SalesNav, because you're right there in LinkedIn, you're talking to them, and you can just click a button and change the list. And then the numbers are all there. You have to be diligent about doing it, but if you introduce a second kind of platform or step where you're also putting that information into a Google Sheet or Excel or Airtable, or trying to put out some kind of reporting suite, it's a lot of work, especially if you've never done it before. So I think the lowest barrier to entry is to just use SalesNav, and you got to pay for it because that's kind of a bummer. But if you're not paying for SalesNav and you just have like free your business where there's no lists, then you just have to do something like with a third-party tool or spreadsheet. That's all you really can do, and that's part of why people pay for SalesNav. So.
I would just like to, there's a cost to integrating any type of measurement system into your operation. The smaller you are, the greater the cost.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the larger you are, the larger the revenue stream, and the more it justifies the cost. Yeah. Good point, David. All right, Chris Baldwin.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Isaac. Just kind of surprised LinkedIn hasn't figured out a way to kind of monetize this stuff yet, or make it, kind of part of the part of the package or some kind of upgraded package. Have you heard anything about something like that coming along? Or no? I'm surprised that if you're going to use it as a sales and marketing tool, you would think that there were some higher ups at LinkedIn going, maybe if we gave them some tools to report this
To
stuff
do a better
out,
job.
we would,
Chris, I'm telling you,
the
keep
stuff
your
would get
expectations
sticky,
low with
right?
Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. There's nothing out. There's nothing there. Like, you can view the number of invite. You can view the people that have a pending invite out. You can view your first degree contacts, but there's no data aggregation anywhere, which, yeah, you would think because it would help people do a better job. But there's probably some reason why they're not going there. I don't know what it is, but it is kind of surprising.
There's some stuff in the LinkedIn ads platform, if you're doing ads, where you can get a bunch of stats where they can pummel you with stats there, but that's the only spot I've seen.
Is that what they think? Maybe the only, they don't want to take away from you potentially purchasing ads, so they're not going to give you the tool access in the regular stuff. Yeah, I would think that you would be able to charge a little bit more of a premium and say, hey, get all of your, partner with somebody and LinkedIn make a little bit more money and have more people using and stuck on the platform. But what do I know?
I'm there with you. All right. Any other questions? LinkedIn sales KPIs. Now is your only time to ask live. All right. I guess you're all super educated now.
I can ask a question, Isaac. It's Judy.
What's up?
Talk about that Databox. How easy is that tool to use? I noticed there's a free version. Could regular people like us figure that out, or do we need an engineer?
Okay, so Databox is pretty versatile. There are some things that are cookie cutter. What we're doing, like with the reporting dashboard that you saw, it would take some major investment to be able to grab the data that you see being built visually. So you could set up a reporting dashboard, but getting the information is the harder part. But yeah, set it up, give it a whirl. Any other questions?
And I noticed you moved away from Data Studio. What was the difference?
I actually still have a little bit of mixed feelings about Data Studio versus our current reporting suite. This one seems to be a little bit easier to use. Some integrations you can do there with our team, so that if we're seeing that in number, and this is part of owning an agency, this might be too much for a smaller company, but we want, as much as we can, accountability for our actions. And so if I'll set up a goal and say, if it looks like this goal is not going to be met this week, then mention it in the Slack channel for our team to investigate. So to kind of just keep quality control as you scale up. I like that kind of thing. Maybe that's possible in Data Studio, but that's one of the reasons also why we moved away. Boom. Any other questions related to LinkedIn sales KPIs? I would love to hear a few more people's thoughts on, what you think your actual average acceptance rates are, reply rates, how many people that you're connected with convert to sales funnel within that narrow campaign. Any other people with some firm data you want to share there?
I'm just starting to build that out a little bit, Isaac, because as you probably know, I'm kind of a one-man band out here, doing my own thing at Aviva Select. But I do notice that my connect rate to folks, just getting a response and connecting, is much higher than it is with an email or even a phone call to their mobile phone or desk phone. I'm probably in the 15 to 20% connect rate. I haven't moved to a spot where I'm really pushing folks to, at least in that side of my business, to you know, to connect and have an offline conversation. Not yet, but
Yeah.
I'm probably looking at spreadsheet plus aspirin or ibuprofen as
Totally.
methodology.
Well, totally. Well, it's my hope is that everyone again walks away going, all right, there are some data points that I should know so that I can dial in my efforts, because you might think you're doing great and you're not, you know, so you can't manage what you don't measure. So my hope is you kind of know what those KPIs should be, give you a couple ideas on how to measure them and some benchmarks for what they should be, so that if they're underperforming, you can say, I need to change this part of my strategy, you know, so that you can do a better job on LinkedIn and make more money.
Isaac Liu is asking in the chat, do different industries have different KPI benchmarks?
Okay, so yeah, so because again, KPI is pretty broad. It's going to be across the board in many departments, many industries, organizations. Sales KPIs, one is a little bit more narrow because it's all directly related to sales. And so different orgs, different industries, different countries are going to have different sales KPIs. And then on LinkedIn, they're going to be more similar just because you've really narrowed down on what you're doing, where and stuff. And so if your end goal is sales on LinkedIn, the table stakes that everyone's going to want to measure are the things like how many invites did you send, how many contacts did you make, how many people are talking, how many opportunities for the future did you discover, how many people converted your CRM. In my mind, the big variable there are what the actual the numbers that you should aim for will be, because by industry, by region, who you are, who you're talking to, those numbers to aim for go up and down quite a bit. And so what you really need to do is do your best, and then yeah, just do your best. But I think the good numbers to shoot for initially, just if you're like, I don't know, we have a clue, what should my acceptance rate be? Aim for those numbers we talked for. But yeah, they're gonna change.